Okay. Okay, awesome people. Good. So my name is Ray Menaged. I'm director of Israel Xpia Bar Ilan, and I teach level one parasha. I'm also going to teach level one and level two halacha tomorrow and the next day. So welcome everybody, and I hope you enjoy the class. I hope you've been enjoying the classes until now. Ezrat Hashem, we're excited to get you here to Israel as soon as we possibly can, and we miss you. And Ezrat Hashem, we're going to be able to be together soon in person and getting into more of that Torah in depth. But for now, Ezrat Hashem, let's learn some good Torah and let's try to bring out the big stuff and get close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so first off, a little bit of technical stuff. Write your name in the chat right now, just for attendance purposes. So just put your name quickly in the chat right now. Give your first and last name, just write it in real quick. There we go. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, this class is topics in Torah. It's level 1 beginners parasha. Now, anybody here was also in Professor Tzvi Shimon's class? Tried that class out yet? Professor Tzvi Shimon's class, that's the level 2 version. Normally, we go against each other. So it's right now, because we're on Zoom right now, you can try out both classes, see what you like better. And but we normally go up against each other. So you pick which one you prefer. So I want to speak a little bit in general, what this class is all about, what we try to do here. And then I'll speak in general a little bit what happens in the level 2 class, and that way you guys can pick which class you think fits what you're looking for. So this is level 1 parasha. Parasha class, we want to try to go through the Torah portion of the week with the goal of knowing what the Torah says. Okay, that's our big goal for the semester. We actually want to know what it says. We want to be knowledgeable Jews. For those that speak Hebrew, which you don't have to speak Hebrew, if I say any Hebrew words in any of my classes that you don't understand, just stop me, be like, Rabbi Alo, we don't know what you're saying right now. Can you please translate yourself? But I'm going to throw out Hebrew words. I assume that people know the basics, that Yitzchak is Isaac, Rivka is Rebecca. But if you don't, that's fine. Just stop me and be like, Alo, what does that word mean? So what we're doing right now is a little bit of a harder word. This class is all about bikiut. Bikiut means breadth. We want to cover a lot of ground. We want to actually know what the Torah says. How many of you guys next year are going to be going to secular universities somewhere in America, Canada, England, or something? Okay, it looks like most of you, okay? So first off, good luck. And number two, when you get there, you should be, I went to University of Florida. University of Florida was about 40,000 students on campus. For quite a bit of Jews, around 6,000 Jews on campus, but very strong. University of Florida is like northern Florida, so you have all the Miami people like myself who went up there for school, but then afterwards, you have all the southern Christians that are over there, and when they say a Jew over there on campus, they think that a Jew actually knows what the Torah says, because you assume if you're Jewish, you know what the basic Bible is. They know. Simple question here, okay, ladies, show of hands. How many of you right now can tell me the 10 commandments? All 10 commandments. One, maybe? Someone scratching over here? A little bit? One. Anybody think they can give 8 commandments? 8 commandments? Show of hands? Yes, no, yes. Right, so that's the point. That's the point. The point is that the most basic thing, the 10 commandments, the world expects Jews to actually know what the 10 commandments are. My goal for you guys this semester is to actually know stuff, to be smart, knowledgeable Jews who know what the Torah says. We offer a lot of other classes here at Bar Ilan that are going to get you to think, get your philosophy going, your theology going, get your academics going also. But even in Torah, a lot of the classes are going to be philosophy. It's going to be about midot, how to be a good person, how to get inspired, how to understand God. This class, totally something different. We actually want you to know what the Torah says. So my goal is to go through as much as possible and cover ground. We're going to really start next week's class with the parsha of the week. Next week will be Lech Lecha, which is the start of the Jewish people. Avraham, originally was Avram, becomes Avraham, Sarah Imenu, the start of the Jewish people, the Jewish family. That's next week's parsha. That's when we're really going to try to cover a lot of ground. Today, I want to start with more basic stuff. We might touch on Noach. We might not touch on Noach. This week's parsha is the second parsha of the Torah. It's Noach. It's all about the flood. Humanity messed up big time. They did what was called, actually pretty funny. Any of you know what humanity did that was so bad? What the word was in Hebrew? It's actually pretty funny with what's going on. Pretty ironic with what's going on right now. The world was so bad, God had to destroy the world. And the Torah uses a funny word for what they were doing wrong. Anybody know what it was? Anybody? Unmute yourself if you know. Huh? Anybody know in English what they were doing?
Was it Sinat Chinam?
No. Well, yeah, yes. They weren't
Was
nice
it
to each
Avodah Zarah?
other. Avodah Zarah, not as much. Sinat Chinam, yes. They really were not united. But the Sinat Chinam, not in the sense that they didn't like each other. They were like murdering each other. And they were like raping each other. And they were like stealing from each other. And the word that Torah uses for what they were doing, interestingly enough, is the word Hamas. That's what it says. The world was doing Hamas, and therefore God destroys the world. Fascinating. Okay, Hamas really means stealing and pillaging, raping, and doing terrible things. That's what it meant in the Bible. And for many years we thought it meant something different, and now I think we realize that it means that till today the same thing. But that's this week's parasha. It's the flood. God destroys the world. God recreates the world. We have Noah. We start over with his kids, and we have 10 generations. We're gonna have a Tower of Babel. All this kind of nice stories that you might have learned growing up. And that's about humanity. And at the end of the parasha, they're going to get to Avraham. And the next week's parasha, we're going to talk about Avraham at length. Okay, that's this week's parasha. I'm going to want to start us off with Bereshit, with the beginning, with the creation of the world. We'll talk a little bit about that today, just to whet our appetite, just a little bit about parasha, but a little bit of the bigger picture about the goals of the class. Again, we want to cover ground. The advanced class, Professor Tzvi Shimon's class, I highly recommend it. He's an unbelievable teacher. He's interesting stuff. He does the exact opposite of what I'm doing. He does what's called the iyun. Iyun means in depth. He's going to take one verse and spend the whole class on that verse and bring out the thumbs and try to get deep and understand philosophy, theology, deep ideas. What is this all about? Why did it happen? First semester, he's going to focus a lot on the Garden of Eden. What took place there? And he's going to talk class after class, different angles about Adam and Eve, the original sin, the snake. What is an evil inclination? That's going to very different style, going much more in depth. You'll have one class that'll build up a very deep philosophical idea. What I want to do in this class is the exact opposite. I want to take his hour class, take the last point, say it over in a minute, 2 minutes. Take the deep idea, and it takes an hour to really understand, but instead I'm going to tell it to you in 1 minute, and then give you a lot of those ideas. That's the idea of covering a lot of ground. So we won't go in as much depth to understand those ideas. We're just going to get those ideas. Make sense? So very different styles of parasha. Okay. Who here's had a parsha class growing up? Whether it's school or Sunday school or on Shabbat. Who here's never had a parsha class before? Awesome. If you've never had a parsha class, you're in big luck. You know why you're in luck? Because you have no preconceived notions, and you're gonna approach the Torah as an adult with adult eyes, which is very powerful. For everybody else that has had some parsha classes, hopefully you remember somewhat of the stories. For those that had more intense parsha classes in high schools, maybe you might have learned a little bit deeper. But I find for the majority, high schools are scared to talk about adult topics. And high schools are scared to approach the Torah as an adult. And a lot of times the stories, the way you learn them as kids, are the same stories you have them even as you were getting older. The idea now is to approach the Torah like adults, to talk about adult topics, adult themes, and really try to get it. Now, anybody know the 4 main ways to learn the Torah? Anybody know? Hey, Lizzie.
I think it's orally written through other people, like stories or
Good.
talk to each other. And then I don't know.
Good. You know what the word is in Hebrew? Anybody know the word in Hebrew?
Halal, is it dot?
On Skylar, what?
Torah bichtav.
No, okay, that's written in Torah. It's true, we have it written in an oral. The oral explains it more, but there's 4 ways to explain it orally. Anybody heard of the word pardes? Pardes? Anybody know what pardes means? Any kids of Israelis here? The word pardes? Unmute if you know what the word pardes is. Nobody pardes? Okay, pardes literally means an orchard, a vineyard. But pardes, actually the root of the word in English of paradise. Paradise, the pardes is the orchard. Why is paradise an orchard? Why is it a vineyard? Because what was the original paradise? The Garden of Eden. It was a garden with fruits and trees. Anybody know how many, midrashically, in the stories of the Torah, anybody know how many trees were in the Garden of Eden? Anybody know? How many trees were in the Garden of Eden? 613 trees, one for each commandment that we had out there. Every tree had a special place with a special fruit, with a special understanding. That was the paradise of the world of heaven, of Garden of Eden. It's the Pardes. The Torah is supposed to be heaven. It's supposed to be paradise. But Ezrat Hashem, God willing, in at least one of your classes, but Ezrat Hashem, you guys are going to taste the paradise. You're going to be part of that orchard, taste of the fruit, the Etz HaChaim, the tree of life, not the tree of knowledge, good and evil. Let's go for the tree of life. Let's go for the good tree and actually experience paradise, but the paradise of knowledge, of Torah, of getting close to God, Ezrat Hashem. But Pardes also symbolizes 4 ways of learning the Torah. Pardes in Hebrew, Pardes, Pei, Reish, Dalet, Samach, 4 letters. Pardes, the first one, Pa, stands for the word Pshat. Pshat means simple understanding. In this class, we're going to try to go through the Torah and try to go through the simple understanding. What does it mean? What happened in the stories? Let's ask the big questions on those stories. Let's try to understand them. And I really want to make it interactive. I want you guys to ask questions. Unmute yourself at any point along the way and ask. I just thought the guys right before, they were pretty good. They really did unmute themselves and they started asking questions along the way. Like, I want you to understand it. I want you to understand adult questions. Those questions you felt like, if those that went to Jewish school and you felt you couldn't ask those questions because it wouldn't be right, it's not good for faith or whatever, ask the questions over here. That's the idea. For those of you that's the first time learning it, great, that's even better. Ask the questions that you have. Don't take things for granted. Let's try to simply understand what happened. What's it all about? That's called Pshat. Then we have the Pardes, the the Reish, that's the Remez. Remez are the hints. There's different hints throughout the Torah. Some of those hints are in the form of letters, in the forms of numbers. Every letter in the Hebrew alphabet corresponds to a number. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2. Sometimes you can build up deep ideas just based on the letters. We're going to get to that today when we speak about Bereshit, in the first letter of the Torah, the Bet. We'll talk about some of the remezes, some of the hints. Then we have Pardes, we have the Da. The Da is Drash. Midrash means the stories. The Midrashim are the stories of the Torah. Now, some of you might have been raised learning that all the stories should be taken literally, and it's the background stories not written in the book, but the rabbis wrote it down, and we have to have all these extra stories to take it literally. Some of you might have learned, don't take anything literally. The Rambam comes along, he writes, if you take all those stories literally, you're a fool. If you take none of them literally, you're also a fool, meaning it's somewhere in the middle, according to Maimonides. We're going to approach the Midrashim, not so much necessarily but historical, but more for what's the lesson. The rabbis give a lot of stories. Rashi loves the Midrash. People think Rashi is just a simple interpretation. It's not true. Rashi likes Midrash. Rashi is the main commentary in the Torah. He likes the stories. His grandson, the Rashbam, likes the simple interpretation. But even in the stories, the lessons are what we're trying to get out of those stories. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll touch on that a little bit today as well. And finally, we have the Sod. The Sod are the secrets of the Torah. The mystical, esoteric, which means the deep ideas behind the Torah. The Kabbalah. Anybody know what the main book of the Kabbalah is? Yeah, Rafaela.
Is it the Zohar?
The Zohar, excellent. Good, Rafaela. The Zohar is the main book of Kabbalah, mystically attributed to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Academics date it a little bit later, but we have ourselves the Zohar. Rafaela, Zohar, what is the Zohar?
I am not sure.
The Zohar is actually a commentary on the Torah. The Zohar is separated based on the Parshas, Bereshit, Noach. It goes to the Torah portion of the week, and it's the secrets, the mystical understanding of the Torah. That's the sod that's behind everything. God willing, we're not going to do as much sod this semester, but we will do a little bit. There will be some areas, maybe even today, even a little bit. We'll touch a little bit on some of the secrets that are involved. The Zohar in particular loves to go into the angle of creation, about how did God create the world, as well as how does God relate to the world. So that's why actually in the first part of the Torah, Bereshit, the Kabbalah spends a lot of time talking, because it talks about how did God actually even create the world. Okay, so that's the idea. We're going to try to go through, we're going to focus, I think, most on this class in the Pshat and the Drash, the simple and the stories that give the meaning. We'll spend a little bit of time just for the fun, a little bit of those hints. Some of you in this class might love the hints. Others might find the hints, okay, a little bit too shticky, but we're going to try to do some hints as well. A little bit of sod here and there, but primarily Pshat and Drash, simple interpretation, and the lessons. We're going to try to focus on those two. Okay, a bit about the accounting of the class. How does the class work? We'll do a little quick share screen over here. Okay. little bit about the class. One more thing. We said we're going to mention a little bit extra emphasis on Rashi. Everybody heard of Rashi? Raise your hand if you've never heard of Rashi. If you've never heard of Rashi, Rashi is from the late 1000s, early 1100s. Rashi is the main commentary on the Torah. So if anybody ever says, "Oh, there's a famous Rashi," the truth is every Rashi is famous because he is the main commentary everybody learns when they grow up in school. Rashi is very focused on the exact section he's talking about, not necessarily as much big picture, much more local understanding. So we'll bring it down because it's the most famous. But now that we're a little bit older, we're going to focus a lot more on Ramban's as well. Ramban, Nachman, Moshe ben Nachman. He gives a more philosophical outlook. He's going to ask a lot of the big questions. He's going to look at the Torah not just based on verse, but what's the bigger picture happening. We'll do a lot of Ramban's, and we'll do a lot of other commentators from all over. We're going to span the last 2,000 years of commentary in this class and just try to get all different angles and try to get a little deeper understanding and cover a lot, get a lot of info out there. Okay. How do we grade for the class? So grading works as follows. Number one, we have attendance and our participation. That's 30% of the grade. Since we're sadly starting on Zoom right now, we're going to be a little more easygoing with some of this kind of stuff, and I'll have some extra credits and things like that. And those that are watching this class in the recording, because of time zones and other issues like that, every class I'll tell you to send me some kind of WhatsApp message just so that you listen to the class. So if you're listening to me tomorrow in a recording, send in WhatsApp the word pardes, Pardes, or you can write it in Hebrew. That's your hint word for today's class, pardes. Send it to me, so that way I know that you listen to the class and I'll get you for attendance. So that's about 30% of the grade. Then 70% of the grade is the final. Final will be at the end of the semester, straightforward, just simple questions. We'll do a review before that with questions as well. Not too hard. It's to be based primarily on the lectures. As long as we're on Zoom, I'll try to have some kind of background paper as well, which maybe I'll give you at the end. But I'll give you a review sheet before the final, so you don't have to worry about it. Yes, Lizzie.
Is the final I know that some teachers were saying that their finals are only multiple choice, and some teachers were saying that their finals are multiple choice and short answers. Which one?
My final is only short answer. My final is only short answer. I want you just to actually know info. I'm not looking to confuse you. It's going to be straightforward, and we're also going to do a review in this class before that. So, and then you guys can review with each other, and you guys can make your answer keys and stuff like that. Like all that stuff. For the final stuff, you can't bring anything with you. You have to actually know it. But you guys are going to be, for those that want to do well, this class, and I'll do extra credit too. If you pay attention, come to class, take some notes, you'll get an A. It's not supposed to be a hard class. There's enough out there available, but you have to put the work in. Put the work in, it'll be easy. But there's no trick questions. We're just trying to learn. That's kind of the idea. Other questions? Unmute if you have any other questions about logistics and stuff.
Were we supposed to WhatsApp you the word of the day?
If you're in this class, just write your name in the chat right now. If you're here right now live, write your name in the chat. Okay, awesome. Okay, let's go now to let's learn a little bit. Let's learn a little Torah. Little Torah. Let's start with Bereshit. Let's start with the very beginning of the Torah. The Torah starts off. Bereshit bara Elohim hashamayim et haaretz. Bereshit. What does Bereshit mean?
In the beginning.
In the beginning. Now, it's actually one of the most complicated words. The first pasuk, I started to learn. Rabbeinu Bachi has a commentary on the Torah. They came out with a new Israeli Hebrew edition with a lot of commentary on his edition. It's 10 volumes on his stuff. I just started it, and I thought I would be able to do it in a year. It's probably going to take me 2 to 3 years to go through it. It's very exciting. Rabbeinu Bachi has about 35 pages on this first verse. Just trying to explain it. It's one of the longest verses. If anybody ever wants to learn a commentary on the Torah, realize the first parsha is the hardest because they're dealing with creation, and they're going to deal with creation from a scientific perspective, from a philosophical and mystical. They don't even know where to start, where to end. So what does the word Bereshit mean? In the beginning, I took the English and Hebrew from Sefaria. Sefaria is an app as well as a website, which is free. It's in Hebrew, it's in English. It has like thousands of books on there, and a lot in English as well. So I actually just took their translation, and their translation I think is funny because they don't even deal with the word beginning. They say when God began. He's like a when. When God began, the bit is a when, but there actually are a lot of complications with this because the question people ask is, why does it say Bereshit bara Elohim, which means in the beginning God created? It would make more sense for it to say, and God created in the beginning. It should have said Elohim bara Bereshit. that God created the beginning. God created time. Like, what's with this funny language? And based on the fact that the language is funny, you're going to have pages and pages of commentaries. Some are going to say that in the beginning, God creates time. Others, the Kabbalah, let's get a little mystical. Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning, God created the idea of God, meaning to actually comprehend God, understand there's a God, that requires comprehension. So what does God create in the beginning? The comprehension of God, meaning God actually is before Elohim. God is before God. God is greater than our ideas of God. Okay, that's beyond today. But there's so many ways to understand it. I don't want to go into too much detail, but we say God creates the heaven and earth. Some take it literally, some take it physically, some take it scientifically. Most take it spiritually. Shamayim here doesn't mean heaven, because we're going to learn later on, God's going to create, it's going to come back to the Shamayim. It's going to come back to the sun and the moon when we get to day number 4, and it's going to go back into more details when it comes to that stuff. So many learn heavens here as spiritual heavens. Aretz referring to physical, not literally land, but physical creation. Okay, let's have fun now with the Midrash. The Midrash comes along and says, there's something weird with starting with the word Bereshit. What's weird with starting with the word Bereshit? What letters does Torah start with? It's actually much bigger in the Torah, which is why I made it bigger here. What's the first letter? It's the letter
Bet.
Bet. Now, Bet, what do we know about Bet? Bet is
2.
which letter?
It's the second letter in the alphabet.
It's the second letter. So comes along the Midrash. It's a Midrash that we teach our kids. My 6-year-old daughter, we teach her this Midrash. But I want to relearn this Midrash now as an adult. God comes along, creates the Torah, starts with the letter Bet, the second letter. So the letter Aleph comes along, and the letter Aleph, the first letter of the Torah, the alphabet, the alphabet, the Aleph Bet, the Aleph comes first, and the Aleph comes along and says, "Hello, Hashem, what about me? You forgot about me. How could you start with the second letter? What about me?" Anybody know how God answers? What happened to the Aleph? It's not fair to the Aleph. Any ideas?
Is it like God was first?
Good, excellent, excellent. How does that show you anything? Excellent. It's true. Good. God was first. What does that have to do with Aleph? How does that answer it? Skylar, excellent. But why? What does Aleph have to do with God being first?
Is it like the Aleph is reserved like for Elohim? Because it
Good,
like, God was
excellent,
first?
excellent, good. Aleph is the first letter of God's name that we have in that first pasuk of Elohim. Excellent, good. One approach, Aleph also, let's go into the Remez. Okay, let's go from the Midrash, let's go to the Remez. What does Aleph? Aleph is the number 1. We know that every letter has a 1 to it. Aleph refers to God, because God is one. God is the ultimate one. What is the biggest statement that a Jew says every single day? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. We say God is one, monotheism. What makes a Jew a Jew? We recognize that God is one, that everything comes from God, that God is the... Now, Aleph comes from 1, number 1. Aleph is also the language of Alufo Shel Olam. Alufo means the great general, the great one of the world. He's the greatest of the great. That's Alufo Shel Olam. For those that are reading Israeli news right now, you're going to be reading a lot of generals. Generals in Hebrew are the Alufim. Aluf is the generals. God is the Alufo Shel Olam. He's the great one of the whole entire world. The Aleph goes to God. The oneness goes to God. What are we? We are created. Being created makes us something else. That's the number 2. That's the Bet. Bet is the second letter. God is the one. God is the everything. God is the ultimate one. Everything is inside that one, according to the Kabbalah. That's the oneness of God. We are the Bet. We are the 2. We are the creation. That God, in some kind of miraculous way, holds himself back, tzimtzum, contracts himself, makes space for us to exist. Either we exist within God, depends how you learn philosophy, but God creates a space for us. Now there's 2, now there's us. God is the ultimate one, Yichudo, the oneness of God. We are the 2. You take the Aleph, the 1, you take the Bet, the 2, you put it together, what do you get? You get an Ab, an Abba. You get a father, Avinu Shbashamayim. When God creates us, the Father in heaven makes us, we now have mankind, we have 2. We come from the Bet, which is the 2. That's the first approach. The next approach says that the Aleph actually is being saved. It's being saved for the Torah itself when God speaks to us in Mount Sinai. And what's the first commandment? Anochi Hashem, I am the Lord your God. That's the Aleph. The Aleph goes to the 10 commandments, the Torah at Mount Sinai, when we actually get it. So God says, don't worry, Aleph. Don't cry. I'm saving you from Matan Torah, from Mount Sinai, when I actually give the Torah to the Jewish people. Okay. A little bit deeper, the bet we said is 2. It also might correspond to a deep idea that God created the Torah 2,000 years before the creation of the world, and God looked at the Torah and created the world from there. If you ever heard that, beyond the scope of this class, but the bet will hint to some other ideas there as well. Okay, last idea about the bet. Let's look at the shape. What's the shape of the bet? It's like a Pac-Man. Why is it like a Pac-Man? Because really what it's saying is that what's above the bet, below the bet, behind the bet, before the creation of the world, we can never really understand God. We don't understand what was before. Once there was a creation, from that point going forward, we can begin to try to understand. And that's the opening of the bet, of the Pac-Man with the rest of the letters following them. That's where we are. But everything before that, above that, that's beyond our comprehension. We can try, but we're never going to ever fully get there. Okay. Fine. Now, beautiful. Excellent. That's Bereshit. That's the beginning of creation. Now, let's look at a Rashi. We said Rashi is the most famous commentary. I actually wasn't planning to do this Rashi to start the year, but seeing everything that's going on in Israel right now, I actually think it's fascinating that the very first Rashi says this, and every so often, we get to this Rashi and we're like, oh, it's still very applicable today. Very first Rashi in the Torah, Rashi comes along, and I'll read it in Hebrew. The English is underneath, but okay, let's go with this Rashi. Hold on. Okay, says Rashi. Bereshit. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, says Rabbi Yitzchak. Now Rashi's not talking about himself, he's talking about an earlier Yitzchak. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, says Rabbi Isaac. Lo hayat tzarich latchil Torah ela me'achol shezeh lachem. He goes, why was the Torah started? Why did the Torah start with the creation of the world? Or more specifically, why did it start with the whole book of Bereshit and the next 2 parashas in Shemot and Exodus in the second book? It should have started with the verse that talks about the first month. Why? Because Rabbi Yitzchak has an assumption. His assumption is that the Torah is a book of laws. That's a book of halacha, of Jewish law. Those of you tomorrow, Thursday, you're going to get me for halacha class. There's an assumption that the Torah is a book of laws. And if it's a book of laws, why are we starting here? Let's fast forward. When we get to the book of Shemot, we get to the next book, we're going to get to the first law given to the Jewish people, to have a Rosh Chodesh, to have a new moon. That should have been the first law. Why are we starting with the whole story of creation, of the Jewish people, of going down to Egypt, slavery? What's the deal with that? Start with the first law. Any have an answer for that? For someone who's never learned Rashi, if you learned Rashi, don't give me Rashi's answer. Any have an answer to that question? Why would God start with the creation of the world instead of the very first law? Skylar, go for it.
Is it to show like kind of our background and like why, like the whole story with Adam and Chava and why like we have these laws?
Okay, good. Background. Good. Other ideas? Give us a little bit of context where we came from. My daughter, my daughter in junior year in high school this year, she has to do a whole family tree where we came from. So her teacher, as the opening page just yesterday, made her write, why is it important to know where you came from? So my daughter was like freaking out, how do I write something good that actually makes sense? Okay, Rafaela.
I feel like it makes more sense to start from like the beginning of the world, kind of like what Scholar said, how like to let me know like where we came from, but also like I don't is it Torah in chronological order or no?
Not, good question.
Like
That's a much bigger question. Really, it's a
Okay.
machloket Rashi and Ramban. According to Rashi, the Torah does not follow chronology. It kind of has a
Okay.
general chronology, but not exactly. According to the Ramban, it's almost always chronological unless you have to make like a change. But
So
but yeah, but I hear what you're saying. Chronology. We want to have an order. It makes more sense to start with creation because it's the beginning. Let's start with the beginning if we're already talking about that. It might not just be a book of laws. It might give us much, much more. You're good. Aviva?
I think maybe because I feel like the epitome of like laws is like because of the mistakes that we make. So like Adam and Eve, like Eve made a mistake, so God was like, okay, here are a set of laws because you made a mistake. I don't
Oh,
know.
I like that. Very good. I actually find that very fascinating. Anybody know okay. We know Judaism is also a book of ethics. Pirkei Avot, our ethics is one of the most famous book people like to love to write commentaries on. Like ethics and who we are and going to be good people and how we mess up, how to learn from being messed up. Excellent. Okay, I like it. Very good. Meital?
Maybe it's because like sometimes you need to create like some sort of like incentive to listen to laws. So by establishing God as like the authority in our religion and like by telling us that he created the universe, it almost tells us that like we should follow his way because he did this for us and he created the world.
Excellent. Okay, good. Beautiful. I think all the answers are good. Meital, your answer is Rabbeinu Bahaya's answer. Rabbeinu Bahaya says, why do we keep mitzvot? You know, okay, it's a book of Jewish law, but why do we keep Jewish law? Because God said so. Okay, thank you very much. God said so. But why? Why did God say so? Why are we here? What is life all about? Let's understand why God created the world. What is God? How is God? Let's understand God. Let's understand the world. Let's understand the Jewish people. Why God chose the Jewish people. What is our mission in life? And once we have that, then the laws are going to make a lot more sense. They're going to be put into context. They're going to be put into meaning. And we'll be able to use it as a way to connect to God himself. That's a really big deal. Awesome. Good. I love it. And I would have answered the way you guys answered it. Rabbeinu Bechaya answers the way Meital answered it. And I think you guys were all right. Also, who takes Rabbi Yitzchak so literally that it has to be a book of law? It could also be a book of ethics. It could also be a book of other ideas too. It could be a lot more than just law. I think Rabbi Yitzchak is saying the main purpose might be the law. Rashi comes along, gives a total different, or this Rabbi Yitzchak gives a total different approach. It's like a curveball answer. But it's so fascinating because I think this curveball answer is very important for us today. And it's really a very Zionistic answer. Comes along Rabbi Yitzchak. And Rabbi Yitzchak says, why? Because we need to understand how God created the world. Because in case, She'im Yomru Umot Ha'olam, in case the nation of the world, in case the non-Jews, the other nations out there in the world, are going to come to the Jewish people. They're going to come to Israel and they're going to tell us, Listimatem, you're a bunch of thieves. Shekavashtem atzot shivat goyim. You conquered the land of Israel, the 7 nations. You stole the land. You're a bunch of European colonialists who stole the land of Israel. You don't deserve to be here. You're not allowed to be here. You're a bunch of thieves. What are you doing in the land of Israel? Hem omrim lahem. We're going to answer them. Kol ha'aretz shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The whole land is God's. Hu bera'ah, God created it, and God's going to give it to the one he wants to give it to. God chose us, God picked us, and therefore it's ours. But very powerful, you know? This is very timely over here. Now, a lot of the commentaries on Rashi has commentaries on him. So they ask, what do you mean? Does the average non-Jew care about this? Does the average non-Jew care that the Torah says that the land is ours? So maybe the Christians, maybe some of the evangelicals out there in the West, they're Bible-oriented people, so for them it might be important. Maybe the Muslims of 200 years, 300 years ago, maybe they thought, the people who calls people the book, maybe they a little bit. But the average agnostic, atheist today, and the average even Christian and a Muslim today, they don't care what the Torah says. So what does this mean? So what is Rashi really telling us? What's this Midrash telling us that Rashi is quoting? That we'd be able to answer that God gave it to us. So they explain that it's for us to understand. It's for us Jews to be confident, to understand. You read the Torah, God created the world, and he gave us the land, and it's ours. And if anybody questions us, we know where it came from. We have our moral superior, our spiritual morality and spirituality. We know God picked us. We are not thieves. We are not listim as this Midrash says over here. We have to know it and understand it and realize what's behind us, and that'll give us the strength to fight against all those that fight against us. Okay, that's the first Rashi. Let's skip a little bit. So that God then creates the world, day 1, day 2, day 3, 4, 5, 6. He looks around at the end of each day, kind of likes it. Day number 1 is a little more complicated. Day number 2 is a little bit more complicated because of the fighting going on between the heavens and the waters and stuff. But God keeps going around. Eventually, we get to day number 6. And God creates animals. And then eventually, God pauses for 1 second. And he creates the most important creation of all of creation, the purpose for the world. God creates man. But before he creates man, God pauses. Vayomer Elohim, and God says, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man, Betzalmeinu kidmutenu, in our image, in our likeness. V'yirdu b'dgat hayam, and they're going to rule over the fish, and over the birds, and over the animals. Let us create man, and he's going to be the ruler over everything. We have a purpose for the world. We have a ruler for the physical world down below. It's called man. And there's the famous question that Rashi asks, many ask it. So God creates us, made a pause, and then God creates us. God talked about creating us because we're so important, and then God creates us. But the language is funny. What's funny? God said, and I made it bold in the Hebrew, let us make man. What's the problem with let us make man? It's in the plural. Why is it in the plural? Isn't there only one God? Didn't we just say Aleph goes to God? God is we're all about monotheism. God is one. Isn't that what we already said? What in the world is God saying? Let us make man. Rashi asked this question. Many asked this question. What is it? Who's God talking to? Anybody here polytheists? Anybody here believe in many gods? The polytheists, they salivate when they get to this parasha. They get so excited because they're like, oh my God, look at this. There's many gods. It says, let us make man. And the truth is, if you go to the very next pasuk, go to the very next verse, it says, God created man in his image. So we see that when God actually created the world, it's in the singular. There's only one God. It sounds like God is speaking to somebody in the verse before, but not that they're actually creating it. There's only one God. Okay, guys, anybody here, ladies, anybody here all heard an answer to that question? Who is God speaking to when he says, let us make man? Yeah, Zoe.
One of the angels.
Okay, good. That's Rashi. Rashi, who I think is not the simplest reason. We're going to try to give a simpler answer in a second. But Rashi says, God is speaking to the angels. Now, why is God speaking to the angels? Because God was worried that the angels might get jealous. And in a show of humility, Rashi says God wanted to teach us how to be humble people. Because one of the most important character traits that a Jew could have, or anybody in the world could have, is to be humble, to make space for other people. The miracle of creation was God holding himself back, being humble, to make space for mankind. We know God's going to give the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, the most humble person, on Mount Sinai, the most humble mountain. And throughout the Torah, there's going to be hints, hint after hint after hint, to being humble. Because if we can make space for other people, give them the opportunity to live as well, that's the most God-like thing we can possibly be. So God wants to teach us humility. And Rashi says, God wants to teach us humility that he's even willing to write a verse in the plural and make the polytheists get excited for a second before they get to the next verse. It's also a very big teaching. One verse is complicated, but the very next verse explains it. And a lot of times, if we just go to the next verse and we learn a little bit more, look at the bigger picture, we're going to find the answers to our questions. I want you ladies to ask as many questions as possible this year. And it can be very specific or very big. But hopefully we're going to learn that if we just learn a little bit more, we'll get to the answers. We'll find those answers. And we're going to look it up. We're going to learn. And actually, I've been teaching this class now for 10 years at Bar Ilan. A lot of the things I'm saying now have been based on questions that I've gotten from students over the last 10 years, where I've opened up the books and looked it up, and they've looked it up, and we've come up with new answers. And those new answers made it just so much deeper and get a much richer understanding. But how do you get to those answers? You have to read more. See more things, open up more psukim, more verses, get to the Navi, get to the Gemara, get to the commentators, and open up your eyes to a lot more Torah, and you'll get to those answers. Okay, so Rashi said, because the angels might get jealous, God wants to be humble. So like the head of a board, the president of the company, the CEO, he's going to invite the vice president, the assistant director. Let's all get in a meeting, even though the director ultimately makes all the calls. But he's going to have them all come together, get their ideas, see what they have to say as well, but also make them feel important. Why would the angels be jealous of us? Huh? Why would the angels be jealous of us? Any ideas? Sydney.
I think that they would probably be jealous because Hashem created the world for us humans, and he keeps the angels like up with him, and they're not able to like live out the world that he created.
Oh, okay, interesting. Good, excellent. I like that. I like that. Okay, I'm looking at the chat right now. I like Jenny. I don't get why God thought the angels would be jealous, because aren't they really holy? Like they wouldn't make mistakes. Excellent. Also, meaning, what are they jealous for? Aren't angels more holy than mankind? Aren't they like the most holy beings? They're spiritual. They don't even have physical. They don't even necessarily have evil inclinations according to the standard approach of angels. So like they're so great. What's the problem with them? But I think the answer is exactly what you're saying. Like, wow, yeah, it's true. On the one hand, they're more holy than us because they're more spiritual. But on the other hand, we learn that while they might be more holy, they don't have the same tests that we have. Actually, one of the guys in the last class asked a great question. don't angels not have free will? Why are they even getting jealous? Like, how could they get jealous? And actually, the Midrashim say the angels fought it out. It wasn't so clear. Some angels said, yes, create the world. Other angels said, no. Truth said that the Jewish people, after the world, mankind, humanity, are going to be so evil. They're going to sin so much. Don't create them. It's not worth it. And the idea that some of these angels might have been ideas, that might have been values, and they're not even like, using their free will. They're doing their job. Their job is to be those attributes, those values, to fight it out to create the world. But the commentators explain that while an angel might be initially spiritual, an angel can't grow. He can't get to higher levels. Mankind is in the scariest position because we can mess up big time, but we could also do some of the greatest things. And we do those greatest things when we use our free will to do the right thing. So what happens is we can become greater than angels because the angels don't have those same tests. We are the ones that were created in God's image. We were the purpose of God's creation. And when you put that together, in certain aspects, we have the ability to be greater than angels in certain ways. And that's why God knew the angels might feel they were jealous. So he had to fight it out. It says truth is fighting out with kindness, and everyone's fighting it out until eventually God creates the world and they came to an agreement, or they read the Midrash how it actually happens. But God ultimately does create the world, and we are here. Okay, that's Rashi. But I actually think Rashi is not the most simple approach. Another approach that I saw, I think a lot easier than Rashi. Why does God speak in the plural? Because God is using what's known as the royal we. For those that are British, this might be a little bit simpler. For the Americans out here, it's a little bit harder. What is the royal we? But the royal we is a much grander way of speaking. When a king speaks, he speaks in the we. When he's speaking to his whole country, he's going to speak in a greater language of, we are going to create something. Why do you speak in the we? Because it's speaking about something that's a lot more important. It's also humble. When a teacher speaks, a lot of times, the teacher will say, what did we learn? What do we get out of this? We were thinking to say. Why does a teacher speak that way? Because it's all of us together. It's another sign. It's another way to show humility. And then another idea, it says, Rav Hirsch says beautifully, when we speak in the we, every big event in the world, God will speak in the we, because the we is saying it applies to everything. It applies to the creation of the world, to the purpose of the world. God is speaking to mankind that's going to be created. This is a very big event. The next time God is going to speak in the language of we is going to be when he makes the Tower of Babel in this week's Parsha Noach, when he scatters the whole world about, when he goes down to see why they're rebelling. Again, it's the language of we, because we is the royal we. It's a much greater way of speaking. So that's a simpler interpretation. Why does God say we? He's not speaking to anybody. He's speaking in a much greater language, because now man is so much greater. Comes along the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah explains why we, because man was created last. Why was man created last? Says the Kabbalah, man was created last because God was going to all the rest of creation and saying, creation, I want all of you to give a bit of yourself into man. Adama, ground. Give man some physical part. Lion, give man his courage. Tigers, give him deers, give him some speed. Everybody give a little bit to man. And then God came along and God blew into us a soul. And God gave us a part of God himself into us as well, so to speak. So all of that creates Na'aseh Adam, let us make man, means the whole world made man, which now means that mankind represents the whole world. Our actions will represent the world, will affect the whole entire world, spiritually as well as physically. Science will come around and say, we're all made of the same building blocks as the world. It makes a much deeper a deeper connection to everything. And it's also hinting to us to the oneness of where we all came from. Last idea, a little bit more of a modern idea. I saw it brought down by many people, Hasidic people, the Soloveitchik, the Gra, maybe even the Zohar. When God said, let us make man, who is God speaking to? God is speaking to us. God says, Allo, man, I'm going to give you a body. I'm going to give you a soul. I'm going to blow into you a soul. But then I'm going to give you free will. And now let us make man. Are you going to step it up? What are you going to do with what I give you? Bezat Hashem, we should be Zocheh this year, to be Adam, to be human beings, and really maximize our potential, do really great things. I want to thank you all. If you haven't written your name in the chat yet, write your name in the chat. And if anybody has any questions, I'm around for questions. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. You as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yom Tov. Yom Tov. How you doing?
Thank you. Bye. Yom Tov.